Earthquakes. The big one could keep you shaking for over 8 minutes. What do you do if it hits when you're at home, at the office, the ballpark, the shopping mall?
We're going to survive this earthquake, I'm convinced, if we take the time to prepare now for it.
Firefighter Henry Johnson helps you get through it with practical tips on what works and what doesn't.
Doors start slamming. If it happens to slam on your fingers, it may not kill you, but you're going to wish you were dead.
Surviving the big one. Next.
This is Parkfield, California, a little town just northeast of San Luis Obispo that sits right on the San Andreas Fault. This is a location of the first official scientifically predicted earthquake, which is expected to be a magnitude 6 that will occur before the end of the year 1993. The people that live here are not planning to leave because they know it's coming and they are prepared.
Just as they're prepared in Parkfield, you should be prepared here.
The Great Quake. Many of us have been hearing all our lives that the big one is coming, the big one is coming. But what we're going to talk about today and help you understand is that we want to dispel a lot of unfounded fears and myths. I want you to know that this earthquake is very, very survivable, as long as you know what to do during and after the quake. I happen to be standing on the San Andreas Fault right now, and we hope it doesn't go while we're here. The concerns you have are not the ground shaking itself, even though that can be extremely traumatic. But what you want to be concerned with is doing the right thing during and after. And these are the things that we will be covering today. The most powerful earthquake in North America was the 1964 Great Alaska Quake, which registered a magnitude of 9.2. More recently, on October 17, 1989, a magnitude 7.1 earthquake struck the Santa Cruz Mountains in Northern California, shaking an area from Monterey Bay to San Francisco. These areas only shook for 15 seconds. While most of the city was intact, there were areas of severe damage. Bridges did collapse, some neighborhoods were destroyed, and there were several fires. The San Francisco quake caused over $5 billion in damage. In Southern California on October 1, 1987, a magnitude 5.9 quake hit the city of Whittier just outside of Los Angeles. It caused over $3 million in damage. Both of these earthquakes have shown us the kinds of problems that large quakes can cause in metropolitan areas. Knowing these situations are going to occur, there are some specific things to keep in mind. The biggest problem that's going to be created by this great quake for most of us is that of separation and isolation from loved ones for as much as 3 days to 2 weeks. This is caused by the freeway systems because most of us work very far from where we live, and if one of your bridges and overpasses goes down, you can't use that freeway. There are 68 bridges and overpasses between where I work in Los Angeles and where I live in Northridge. If I decide to walk home, I've looked at the situation and determined it would take me about 3 to 5 days to walk home safely. Not because I'm slow, but because I'd want to go around any hazards. I'd also not want to walk at night, and I want to walk around reservoirs. Also, the emergency services are going to be disrupted in the same way. You may not have fire, police, and medical for that same period of time, so you really can't count on them being there. Most people aren't aware that the entire continent of the United States is affected by earthquakes, except for portions of Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, and portions of Florida. Now, before you decide to move to or back to these locations, I'd like to forewarn you that they experience tornadoes and hurricanes on an annual basis. So it's kind of like pick your disaster. Here in California is the highest earthquake risk or seismic risk in the nation. On this side of the San Andreas, we have the North American plate, and on the other side over here, we have the Pacific plate. And the San Andreas is the dividing line of those two plates. Many of us have been hearing for years that the Pacific plate of California is going to crack and fall off into the sea. And what you see on this side is actually New Malibu Estates. Well, I'm not saying I was paranoid, but when I was in junior high, I used to keep water wings in my locker just in case. What I want you to know is this is never, ever going to happen. And the reason is what we're sitting on is a north-south strike slip fault. So what we're standing on right here is the horizontal motion that will occur when these plates move. It will not dive underneath the plate. It will not crack and fall off into the sea. It will actually bring the Los Angeles area a little bit closer to San Francisco. This little fault line here is the Newport-Inglewood Fault. This earthquake fault is of more concern to the greater Los Angeles area because it runs up from Newport, Long Beach area through Compton, Culver City, and disappears underneath Westwood and Beverly Hills. If this particular fault produces a magnitude 6.5 on the Richter scale, it will create more destructive energy in the Los Angeles basin than an 8.3 on the San Andreas Fault. While the 1989 Santa Cruz-San Francisco earthquake occurred on the northern portion of the San Andreas Fault, the southern half of the fault was not affected. According to a recent U.S. Geological Survey report, the southern San Andreas, which includes the Mojave and Coachella Valley segments, has a 60% probability of producing a magnitude 7.5 to 8 earthquake within the next 30 years. If the earthquake is of magnitude 8 or greater, it could trigger what's known as a multiple epicenter event, or more than one earthquake. If this happens, the ground could shake for as much as 1 to 5 minutes. As stressful as this might seem, it is still very survivable, provided you're prepared. What I would like you to do is get ready as though the big one will happen before the end of this year. That way, if you're prepared, and it doesn't happen in the next few years, who cares? The last time this segment of the San Andreas moved was during the Great Fort Tejon quake in 1857. The San Andreas moves on the average of 131 years, and it's been 132 years since we've had an earthquake on this fault. When that earthquake did occur, it moved the ground here an average of 30 to 50 feet at one time. The first thing you'll feel in an earthquake is what they call P waves. And this is where you get a shock wave moving through the ground, a vibration or a strong, violent shake. The next thing that will come through are the S waves. And the S waves actually roll through the ground at various angles. They may go up and down, they may go sideways. You can also get tremendous vertical motion, horizontal, and the ground can actually rotate in various directions, and sometimes all at the same time. Many people are afraid that if they live near an earthquake fault, when the earthquake occurs, the shaking is going to destroy their home. The house you see behind me is a home that sits on what many believe is the epicenter of the October 1989 San Francisco earthquake. And the fissure you see here is what the people inside saw as they ran outside. You must understand that when this earthquake occurred, it was very quick in this area, but the shock waves as they moved out towards San Francisco changed their motions, and that's what caused a lot of damage in the areas that you saw there. Damage caused by the Great Quake is going to be very spotty. It's kind of like the way a tornado jumps around. It's not like the movie Earthquake, where we see the entire city of Los Angeles being leveled. The high-rise buildings you see behind me are steel-reinforced glass high-rise buildings that move tremendously in earthquakes back and forth, but lose very little glass or marble. A lot of people think that high-rise buildings just sit there and go like this. Well, if they did that, there'd be nobody on the top floor either before or after the earthquake. But what actually happens is the base moves first, and the building tries to catch up. And the more violent the earthquake, the more the building just sits there in shimmies, rather than a slow roller that can really get them moving back and forth. There are two types of homes you should be aware of that are affected by earthquakes: those that are built before 1940 and those that are built after. This home here was built before 1940, and it was not required to be bolted to its foundation. In the Whittier earthquake, 120 of these homes were actually slid off their foundation, and some of them were a total loss. these types can be reinforced and the foundations tied down. It's kind of expensive, but it can be done. This house here next door was built after the earthquake, or rebuilt, and it has been built up to the new standards. It is bolted to the foundation and the walls have been reinforced to minimize the damage. Wood frame stucco apartment houses and condominiums do very well in earthquakes. The ones you see behind me are a good example of the type I'm talking about. They will move tremendously back and forth, but after the earthquake's over, you've got to be very cautious in your evacuation. Anything that's overhanging a door could potentially be shaken loose and drop after the earthquake occurs. Another type of building that is a great concern is an unreinforced brick apartment house like you see here. These will stand after an earthquake because of the wood frame structure inside, but what happens is that the walls tend to fall away, and a lot of people in past earthquakes have been injured and killed as a result of these bricks coming off as they're running outside. So what you want to do is go to inside walls and stay there to the interior of the building till the earthquake is over, and then you go ahead and evacuate with caution. If you live in a mobile home park, remember, mobile homes are mobile. During the earthquake, they can start bouncing around unless they're tied down and secured. If you're in a mobile home, ride it out, protect yourself as best you can. If you're in bed, stay there. After the shaking's over, remember, things will be all over. Put on your shoes, evacuate with caution. Once you get outside, stay clear of the mobile homes and trailers. They may bounce around in aftershocks, and if you can, shut off the utilities, then at that time, do so. I'm here in Alaska, where in 1964, March 27th at 5:36 p.m., the Great Alaskan Earthquake began. This earthquake originally was considered to be a magnitude 8.4 to 8.7, which has since been reevaluated and was considered a magnitude 9.2. There were a total of 115 fatalities from this earthquake, which were from here in Alaska all the way to California. There were 11 who died in Crescent City and 4 who died in Oregon. But here in Anchorage, the total fatality was only 9. Amazingly small for this giant quake that hit this area. The duration of shaking of this earthquake has been determined to be 4 minutes and 25 seconds to 7 full minutes. Some areas it shook even longer. Now you can imagine shaking continually going on and on. I talked to a woman who was here in Anchorage in 1964, and she lived in this community called Turnagain Heights, which is just behind me, off to the left there. This portion of the city actually began to sink down and walk towards the sea. Over 200 homes ultimately were lost in this area, and her home was in this area. But she said when the earthquake started, she said it was terrifying. Everything was falling off the shelves and things were moving, and her husband and her were struggling to get to the window to see what was happening. And as the ground continued to shake, they kept looking at their watches, you know, when's it going to stop? When's it going to stop? 4 minutes, 5 minutes went by. She said after 7 minutes, her husband and her looked at each other and said it's never going to stop. And she said we went from complete terror to actually completely bored. And they went back and sat down on their sofa and just kind of rode it out for the final few minutes. The thing to remember is that the people who went through this massive quake, which was North America's worst ever, survived it. And that's an important lesson for us. This is 4th Street in downtown Anchorage. This is a location during the '64 earthquake where the ground settled down about 18 to 20 feet. The thing you got to remember is that earthquake took 7 minutes to shake this area, and it was that long for the area to settle down. There were no serious injuries or fatalities at that time, but something devastating immediately occurred. It instantly disrupted shopping. There was a gentleman down in this area that was able to film during the earthquake, and the interesting thing to see is that the wood frame structures did very, very well. Even though they were damaged beyond repair, they did not collapse, and the area was very survivable. In fact, the rest of the businesses in the area had little to no damage at all. We're here in Sylmar in the San Fernando Valley, where in 1971, about 6:01 in the morning, we experienced a 6.5 earthquake that caused a tremendous amount of damage and cost the lives of about 58 people. At the VA hospital not far from here, we had a total collapse of one structure that was built in 1928, and 52 people died. Here at the Oliveview Medical Center, they had tremendous damage. 3 people died at this facility. 2 were on life support systems when the power system failed. And one was an ambulance attendant who was running outside during the earthquake and was killed when he was crushed under the parking structure. When the earthquake hit here at Oliveview, to help you understand what the people here went through, the mountains in the background were driven up 3 to 7 feet. The power began to fail, things were shaking, a tremendous noise, and immediately panic hits everybody. A phenomenon called feet don't fail me now enters in, and the first concern people have is to run out of the building. A lot of the staff left the facility at this time to get outside and then realize after the shaking had stopped that the patients were still stuck inside the building. In looking at the structure, they realized that it was leaning and were afraid that it may collapse, and so wisely they stayed outside until the fire department could come and give the okay for evacuation. What we need to understand is that these earthquakes are very personal and they are very traumatizing, and we have to be ready to accept what we do, try to do the best we can, and then recover as quickly as possible. We have over 3 million people that live in the city of Los Angeles, and over 7 million that live in the county of Los Angeles. And one of the problems that's going to be created after a great quake is you could have areas that don't have supplies available to them for extended periods of time. I mean, think about it. We're a service society. You go to your grocery store to get the items you need, your clothing, the gas at the gas station. All of these things are either trucked in or flown in and then trucked to these locations. The road system will be disrupted in some areas. It may be very difficult to get supplies in. LAX is considered to be a location eventually where they will bring in supplies. If the Great Quake hits, they feel LA International should do pretty well. If the Newport Inglewood goes, then they figure at least they could use it as a heliport if the runways were broken up. The other concern that they have, and this is a major economic concern, is the LA harbor. If the harbor is severely hit, if portions of it are raised up, it will stop the flow of goods into that area for an extended period of time. Right now, LA Harbor is one of the busiest economic ports in the United States today. Billions of dollars go in and out of there daily. That immediately will quit. At this time, the other consideration is, what about the banking? We are an electronic banking society now, and what we do is do all of our banking with computers. And we also have those little plastic cards where you go up to the machine and say, hello, give me bucks. Well, those will quit working right away. The banking industry has indicated that the outlying banks may not function for 7 weeks or more. Now think about that. What do you do without money? It's going to be cash and carry right after the earthquake. And businesses are a concern as well. The federal government has promised that they are going to fly in plane loads of money as soon as they can. We were disappointed to learn they're not going to drop it from the planes. But what they're going to do is go into airports that are still functioning and then fly it into locations like large stadium areas, high school and college football stadiums with military escort, and set up makeshift banks where you could go and actually show your bank account and receive money. How many of you have been told that after the Great Quake, the Red Cross is going to be here with donuts and coffee? Well, the reality of it is, in a Great Quake, it takes several days before the Red Cross can really get set up. And if you think about it, we are the Red Cross, those of us who volunteer. Because of this problem, you should consider that you're going to be camping out for several days, taking care of your own needs. In Whittier area, a lot of people did this in the local parks and also in their backyards and front yards. In the Los Angeles area, we have 42 identified surface faults, and in this area, a lot of people are concerned about where they live. Well, I happen to be concerned about number 24. That's the Northridge Hills Fault. And this is my home. Right underneath me is where, as near as I can figure, the Northridge Hills Fault lies. And as you look at my garage, you can see that the side of it's towed out a little bit. And if you look over here, I'll open up the garage door, you can actually see a crack, which originally started out to be 1/8 of an inch wide about 17 years ago, and it's gradually getting larger and larger. What's happening is that this portion of my garage is kind of sliding off to the side if this particular fault moved. I'm not concerned that it would level my home. Obviously, there'd be a lot of damage, but what I've done is severed my emotional ties to my home. How many of you have your beds underneath your windows so that you can lay there at night and look at the stars? You might want to consider moving your bed away from your window, and at night, what you can do is close your curtains and your mini blinds so that if the earthquake occurs and breaks the glass would actually be stopped by those things and drop straight down. If you have mirrors on dressers, you need to secure those so they don't fall over. I happen to have a mirror on the wall here, and what I've done is with double stick tape, attached it to the wall so that it will hold it there even if it should break. If you have mirrors on your ceilings, I don't know what to tell you. If you're in bed when the earthquake strikes, what you should do is stay in bed, cover up with your blankets and pillows, ride out the earthquake right there. Don't try to get underneath your bed. Many of your beds are too low to the ground. But when the earthquake stops moving, then what you do is you get your flashlight, turn it on, find your shoes, which you want to put on before you start walking through the house. Remember, many areas of the homes there may be a lot of glass. A good place to keep your supplies in your home is in a closet area like this. The closet has very close bearing walls that do very good in earthquakes. Wood frame, stucco construction like apartments, condominiums, single-family homes have a lot of these areas. Try to pick an area close to a doorway where you can get into it shortest distance to get these items out. But as you look at this, you can see I have extra sleeping bags. I have a little portable toilet with a little shelter area for it in case our toilet doesn't work or the house can't be used for that purpose. You see the plastic bags that we have up here. This is for human waste or other items that might breed bacteria that you have to control. Keep some extra rope in here and also plastic sheeting to put over windows with staple guns so that we can close up the windows to keep the weather out if we need to. Have some heavy jackets and items in here. Also, we keep a pair of goggles in case they have to do any work around glass or anything that could injure the eyes. And very important for you to have filters, dust masks of some kind, so that if you're in an area where there is a lot of dust, one of the biggest problems in earthquakes is airborne bacteria in dust. So this will help filter it out. And also, you can't have enough work gloves on hand. Some other items that we keep in the closet here. I keep a roll of what's commonly called duct tape, and this is used for taping various items. You can tape patches and covers that you may have for shelters. Down here on the floor, you can see we have our little family evacuation pack. It's a little emergency pack. There's enough food and medical supplies and cooking utensils and everything in here for my family of 4 for 3 to 5 days. We keep in here Boy Scout field and handbook, very good for giving you ideas on setting up shelters or whatever you need to do. We keep a little ditty bag with some money on hand so that if we don't have any cash after the earthquake, you figure everything's going to be cash and carry. We also keep in here, and this is very important, that you keep some family pictures so that the family can look at these, especially when some of them may be separated. This really helps psychologically with your earthquake preparedness. And this is a handbook that deals with psychological first aid. These can be gotten a hold of from the Office of Emergency Services. Some of the fire services have these as well. Got some extra little flashlights. These have 10-year shelf life on the batteries, more gloves, and a standard and advanced first aid handbook from the Red Cross. Very good to have. Also in here, we have some other items. Baby wipes. These are food bars for our family. Cooking utensils. Batteries that store for 20 years that you just twist and activate them. First aid kits in here. There's 36 dehydrated meals. And this particular pack is what we use if we're asked to evacuate the neighborhood. We take this pack with us. The only thing it's lacking is water. You do have to take your water with you, and we also take this pack whenever we go to Disneyland. Any place where we're on the road, might be traveling a long distance, you never know. The earthquake could occur at that time, and it's good to have these items with you. As far as water supply, bottled water in the case. Bottling companies, Sparklets, Arrowhead, any of the companies out there that bottle water are an excellent resource for water storage. The 1-gallon containers are good to have, some of at your home, so that if you're asked to evacuate the neighborhood and take your water with you, you can carry one of these in each hand. It's very simple to transport. I also have here in the closet 2 5-gallon water containers for staying here and using the water. These are fairly heavy, they're about 45 pounds in weight. I also have what they call a claw tool crowbar. This is in case I have to force entry into any of the rooms here because maybe the house will move and jam the doors, and this is something that you can use in the house. And this here is a security strong box that's fire resistive. You can get these in home improvement stores. They're fairly inexpensive. But what you want to do is keep your valuable papers in here, just in case if you should have a fire, that you can retrieve these afterwards, or you can simply grab this and take it with you if you had to evacuate. So these are just some items that you can keep on hand, and again, a closet's a very good place to keep them. Water companies indicate that we should plan on having water to sustain us for all our needs for at least 1 week period until they can restore services. The minimum storage for an individual is 2 gallons per person per day for that 1 week period. If you can get more, that's better. The bottled water we talked about is one way. You can also supplement that. If you have room to store, you can get large water barrels. You can look in the phone book under earthquake supply companies. But these barrels are 55-gallon drums, and you just use regular tap water. You fill it up halfway, put an ounce of liquid chlorine bleach, fill it the rest of the way, and seal it off. It'll store like this for 6 months, and then you should change it out. But this barrel here is enough for 2 gallons per person per day for a family of 4 for 1 week. My family, I happen to have 2 of them. One of them's to share with my neighbors so that I can get some of the things I don't have from him. If you have a swimming pool like my neighbor does here, don't consider using this water for drinking. You can use pool water for bathing, sanitation, pouring down a toilet to make it work, but you shouldn't use it for drinking because not so much the threat of chlorine, but it's the accumulation of salts and acids. The accumulation of these chemicals in the water, prolonged drinking of pool water by the medical profession has indicated it can create serious kidney damage. So for that reason, you should consider it for those areas of sanitation, cleanliness, and also you could use it for firefighting. Regarding the foods that you want to store for an earthquake, try to stick with the foods you normally eat. Canned foods are good. They store for long periods of time. Many of them have expiration dates. When you go to use the canned foods, the rule of thumb is if it's swollen, don't eat it. If you open it and it smells bad, don't eat it. The priority in eating foods after an earthquake, when the power fails and the refrigerator quits working, you eat the refrigerated foods first, the perishables, the frozen foods second, and then the canned foods last. Remember, after the earthquake, many pharmacies may not be open, supplies may not be coming in right away, so you want to keep on hand at least a 3 to 14-day supply of prescription medications and also an extra pair of glasses. Earthquakes have a tendency at times to change the decor of our apartments and homes. They do this by shaking back and forth and dumping a lot of the things out of our cupboards that we keep. If you want to minimize or prevent this from happening, what you can do is put little, what they call baby latches or locks on your cupboards that have a tendency to catch those doors so that they won't open up. When they do this, it'll keep those items inside, but be very careful when you open up your cupboards again because a lot of these dishes may be leaning against them. Another thing to be concerned about, if you're in the kitchen when the earthquake starts, as soon as it starts, get out of the kitchen as fast as you can. You can't cope with the refrigerator and all the items moving back and forth. Another area of concern during earthquakes are objects that sit on top of TVs, counters, and in businesses like typewriters and computers. They can be thrown off of these surfaces during earthquakes or slammed across a room, like an IBM typewriter was in Kalinga in 1983. 40 pounds, it went completely across the room, hitting the wall on the other side. A way to secure these items is simply by putting Velcro type products on the bottom of these items and onto the counters that they sit on. This happens to be a Quake Grip product put out by Velcro, and there may be other companies out there as well, but these are used to go underneath and between that gap where the feet hold the object off of these surfaces and holds them during the earthquake. You also should be concerned about hanging plants. During earthquakes, these tend to shake back and forth violently, and if they are ceramic pots with dirt in them, they can be lethal weapons. Plastic pots with silk or plastic plants in them might be a better way to go. How many of you are planning to get in a doorway when the earthquake strikes? A lot of us have been taught over the years to get in a doorway and brace ourselves and ride out the earthquake here. Recent information has shown that a lot of people have been injured in doorways, very violent motion back and forth, furniture moving back and forth that can hurt you, and also doors start slamming. And if it happens to slam on your fingers, it may not kill you, but you're going to wish you were dead. What you might want to consider doing instead of getting in a doorway is just go straight down, if you're near a hallway, into that hallway for protection. What you do is you just come down here real quick, brace yourself, and ride out the earthquake here in the hallway. Not many objects around, and you have to plan this ahead of time so that you know the areas that are safe and that aren't safe. If you can afford a gasoline generator, you might want to get one of these to run your appliances. I've got this one to keep the TV working so the kids will be busy. But you can take this, set it outside somewhere where there's good ventilation so the exhaust won't be inside the house. Get yourself plenty of extension cords so you can reach the appliances you want to reach. If you cannot afford to get a generator and you find out your neighbor has one, you might want to get this cord anyways. The gasoline for generators, you can store that and get safety cans to do so, but also a lot of cars in the area, you can get gas from them. One other thing you might want to consider getting for your family in each particular room, especially the bathrooms and maybe the hallway, this particular device is called an emergency or power failure light. And this light is actually a flashlight that is being charged at all times, and when the power fails, the light will actually come on and light up the room. This flashlight can also be taken out and carried with you to find your way about the house. It has a little sensor in there so that the light won't come on when it's light in the room. So it doesn't work in the daytime, but it does work at night. Before the earthquake occurs, you need to be able to identify where your utility shutoffs are and then know how to go about turning those off after the earthquake occurs. You need to find your water input to your house and where the shutoff is. And you need to check these valves and make sure that they're free turning. A lot of these are frozen solid, and so they've got to be there usable by anybody in the family after the earthquake occurs, especially if you're not home to do so. The next utility you should locate is your gas meter. You should purchase either an adjustable or other appropriate wrench to shut off the meter. If you get an adjustable wrench, what you should do is put it in a plastic bag and lubricate it. A lot of times when these are stored outside, out of sight, they tend to rust in a closed position. But when you get your wrench, you want to locate where the shutoff is, down where it comes up out of the ground. And the gas company recommends, along with the fire department, that if you want to check your valve to make sure it's free turning, that you use your wrench, you put it on the shutoff, and you turn it just 1/8 of a turn. Not all the way down, because that'll turn it off. And then turn it back where it was. When you want to turn it off after the quake, turn it 1/4 turn in this position and leave it off until the gas company can restore your service. Now, if you want, you can purchase automatic state-certified gas shutoff valves. These valves are designed, and there are 2 or 3 different types, to shut off your gas if the building shakes enough to cause structural damage and maybe break the pipe connections in the walls. These are not cheap, but it's something that a lot of people are concerned about. If they're not home, it will automatically shut the gas off for them. All our new fire stations in the city are being fitted with gas shutoff valves like these. And it's very important because fire after earthquake is a secondary cause of disaster. And for the fire department, it's our major concern, especially if the winds are blowing. The third utility you want to identify and take a look at is your electrical shutoff panel. You might have fuse boxes, or you might have a panel that looks like this. In apartments and condominiums, you'll find this inside those units, sometimes in a closet area. But when you go to turn off your power after an earthquake, if you decide to do so, and if you have any serious cracks in your building, broken windows, you should shut down the power because there could be surges as a result of power failures in the attempt to get the services back on. Turn your small breakers off first, and then if you want, go ahead and pull your main breaker. When you pull a main breaker like this, a lot of times it will spark, and it can startle you. So you just turn, it's like turning down the water very easily. You just flip these little breakers and then pull the main breaker out. Your water heater is actually a secondary source for drinking water, but it also has the potential of being a tremendous hazard. And the reason for this is that a lot of them are gas or electric units, and if they tend to be thrown or broke loose during the earthquake, they can fall over and actually cause a fire. Many fires in San Fernando and also the Whittier earthquake were caused by water heaters that fell over. What you need to do is secure your water heater, tie it so that it minimizes the movement back and forth, and you also need to make sure that you have a flex hose attached to the gas connection especially, so that if it does move, it has the ability to do so without breaking the gas line. Another important thing to have for your home or apartment is a large multi-purpose dry chemical fire extinguisher. There are different brands out on the market. Make sure when you get one, you get it on sale. But the ABC rating are the common types of fires that this extinguisher will put out, and they can be done safely and effectively. You want to make sure it has a hose, and also on the extinguisher, it has instructions on how to use it. But knowing how to use this and when to use it is the most important part. Now, to operate the extinguisher, what you have to do is pull this safety pin out, make sure you've got control of the hose. Now you can squeeze the trigger, you aim at the base of the fire, and you put the fire out. Sometimes these will stick, but just give them a good push. You can see the powder, this will be inside the house, but that's how you go ahead and put out your fire. How many of you have pets? And how many of you are going to be concerned about your pets after the earthquake? I mean, if you're at work and there's nobody home, who's going to be there to take care of Fluffy? You might want to check with your neighbors to come over. I talked to one guy the other day, and he said, I've got the problem solved. My dog, I lock him up on the back porch, and in a closet, I have a bag of food that's opened up. When the earthquake hits, the door flies open, the bag hits the floor, he eats for 2 weeks. As far as your pets, you have to make sure you've got plenty of supplies for your pets, so that if you are at home, they have what they need. If you don't have this, I mean, after the earthquake hits, Fluffy's going to look at you differently. How many of you have earthquake insurance? A lot of people have asked over the years, should we get it, shouldn't we get it? It's expensive. A lot of the insurance companies require 10% deductible. Some reports have indicated that the insurance companies are about $22 billion short of their funded liability for insurance in earthquakes. I think it's something that really should be considered. The situation comes to mind here in Whittier, where a man I know of, his home was totally destroyed by the earthquake on October 1st. Now, it didn't fall down, but it was pulled apart in several places to where it caused $148,000 worth of damage. The swimming pool was cracked. The place was a mess. He ended up having to pay $14,800 damage, and the insurance company picked up the rest. So as far as it being valuable it is, you do need to make sure your policies will cover what you want: fire, flood, fires due to outside force, a neighbor's house burning, also aftershocks. Check on that as well. But it's something that you really should consider if you want to rebuild in the area that you live. In the office where you work, or any place that you spend a lot of your time, take the time to evaluate the situation around you, see where there might be a safer area that you may choose to go to when an earthquake begins. A lot of times you have that time to do so. If you happen to be near windows, If your windows don't have the protective coating on them, these can be extremely dangerous. So you've got to consider either moving away from them and finding shelter during the quake in case they should break. But if you cannot get away, a lot of us have been taught over the years to drop and cover, the old nuclear drop drill, where you get down like this and you stay in that position during the earthquake. Well, you can imagine the building moving around. How long can you balance on your knees with the building pitching and bucking around? What you should consider is a drop, cover, and hold, where you get underneath, and any way you can, you hold on, and it's very awkward in these desks. You have to take the time to see if, in fact, you can accomplish this or not. You may end up just being able to hold on and get near the desk below the top of the level so that you don't have anything hit you in the head. But to ride that earthquake out and protect yourself as best you can is something that you need to do before the earthquake so that you can respond when the earthquake hits. One of the things you definitely want to have on hand at the office is a pair of good walking shoes or old raunchy tennis shoes. If you wear high heels to work and after the earthquake you decide you want to walk home, when you take off, you're going to be looking good. But after about a mile and a half, your legs are going to be killing you. So what you should have is at least a flashlight, also some batteries. You want to make sure you have AM/FM radio so you can get information. High-energy food bars are good. Whistles so that if you get stuck in the building, you can start blowing this. You keep blowing this, and eventually somebody's going to come to help you or at least shut you up. And also you want to consider the other problem we have with theft. Some people have experienced the problem, they open up, hey, who took my Snickers bar? But some have had success if they put their Snickers in their old raunchy tennis shoes. Nobody seems to want to bother it then. If you're in school when the earthquake hits, what's the procedure that we do? The drop, cover, and hold procedure. So when I tell the two of you to go ahead and drop, cover, and hold, then demonstrate that for us. All right, ready? All the rest of you just sit there, okay? Go ahead, drop, cover, hold. Hang on tight. Kind of wiggle back and forth. You make it shake a little bit. There you go. All right, nice mild earthquake. Okay, the earthquake's over, all clear. Very good. Okay, now, are we all ready to do this? Yes. Ready? Drop, cover, hold. All right, the ground's shaking back and forth. Hang on. The tables are moving. Can you feel them moving? Shake them, shake them. There you go. Keep it up. Very good, very good. Okay, the earthquake's over. All clear. How many of you remember hearing about rumors of death and destruction that were going around immediately after the Whittier and San Fernando quakes? Well, many people, especially children, heard these rumors and believed they were true. It is very important to warn young people not to believe any quake rumors they may hear. In '71, there are still children being treated because of the trauma, the fears that their parents wouldn't be able to get back to them or possibly they had been killed in the earthquake. I told my son when he was about 3 years old that it'd be okay if he's at school, we're going to be fine, it's just going to take a while to get there. And he said, well, Dad, I'm really worried, you know, and I said, I'm going to be okay, Matt. And he said, but Dad, I said, Matt, look, earthquakes can't hurt firemen. Now, I kind of stretched it, but he bought it. He was walking around saying, hey, earthquakes can't hurt firemen. He's about 9.5 years old. He was talking about this with his friends, and he told them this. That night when I got home from work, it was the first time my son took me to my room. But what the important thing is you have to reinforce the fact that we will be able to get back to them, but it will take a while. Your children, just ask them this question. You want me to get back to you? Yes. You want me to get back safely? Yes. Then it might take a while. It might take 3 days to 2 weeks in some situations. They won't like that, but they will hold on to that hope and wait for you to come. After 2 weeks, well, then things will get a little iffy, but what you want to do is reinforce these things for your children. It's very, very important. What would you do if you were at your favorite sporting event and the earthquake should strike? Well, that's what happened to the 63,000 people who attended Game 3 of the 1989 World Series. They were lucky. Because the earthquake was so short, panic did not have a chance to set in. What you need to think about is hanging on tight and riding out the earthquake. The stadiums themselves should do very well, But the problem you're going to have is with the people that are in the stadium. A lot of people are going to start screaming and yelling, and there'll be a stampede for the exits in most situations. So you've got to avoid that as much as possible and stay up for this. Don't get down low where you can be trampled, but be aware of what's going on around you and adjust to the situation as best you can. Once the shaking's over, then you want to kind of cool it for a while and see what's going on, find out what the safest place would be to go to, or maybe you'd even stay where you are for a while until everybody is gone and out of the area, and then make your move. How many of you are mollies? Well, if a lot of you come to a shopping mall more than twice a month, like I do, you're considered a molly. The question is, what do you do if you're here when the earthquake hits? What I used to do is walk right down the center of the mall, kind of looking from side to side, occasionally stopping in at See's Candy. Well, now what I do is I walk very close to the side of stores, whether it be down here or up on the upper level, because the scientists indicate that when the earthquake comes, we'll hear it first. It'll sound like a very large train or truck coming from the north or southeast. When you start to hear something or feel any motion at all, what you want to do is duck inside the first door you can as far as possible. The reason is you can deal with clothes racks and mannequins a lot easier than you can deal with the walkways. Another concern people have is, what do you do if you're in a theater when an earthquake hits? Well, you should be aware of what the theater's like, how it's laid out. Just kind of take note of the way things are around you and understand that when the earthquake starts and the shaking begins, people are going to begin screaming and yelling. A lot of people are going to get up, panic, and start running in all directions. Resist this urge to join them and stay where you are. Make sure everything is clear, and then get down low. If you determine that things are starting to come apart on you, you get down and you hang on as best you can and get against the seats and ride this earthquake out. Staying below the tops of the seats is about the best protection that you have. These seats are bolted to the floor, so you don't have the problem of furniture moving around. But your biggest concern is going to be the people panicking and trying to run out. How many after the earthquake are going to want to make a phone call to find out how your loved ones are doing? One of the things you need to remember that when the earth shakes, a lot of the phone receivers are going to be knocked off the hook. They'll be hanging free, and the phone company can only handle about 10% of the phones being off the hook at one time, and then it automatically shuts down. What you want to do is put phones back on the receiver as soon as you can. It's going to be exciting, and you may not be able to do that right away. But as soon as you can do so, it'll help the phone company reestablish the service. Now, intercity and interstate communications are probably going to be disrupted the longest, some areas more than others. But out-of-state phone communications is going to be established as quickly as possible, and also emergency phone systems. Those are fire stations, police stations, hospitals, and payphones. Payphones can be used by emergency service people in the field, and they can also be used by you and your family. What you want to do is establish an out-of-state phone contact that everybody in your family has, and what that is a relative or friend that you've talked to, and they've agreed to be your one family's out-of-state contact. And that one person, name and phone number, will actually be carried on them, on you and by your loved ones. And it will have that person's name, area code, and phone number, so that you don't have to think about it. You can pull it out, or anybody can call that number. Kids should have a number like that taped inside their lunch pails and notebooks. You should carry it in your wallets. Babysitters should have it. Anybody you want to get information about should have that one person's name and phone number on them at all times. The reason you want this one person to be your out-of-state phone contact is so that everybody in the family that has that name and number can call that person, tell them how they are, and even find out how everybody else is doing over a period of time. Also remember this, you want to keep some change with you, because that phone call, you're still going to need to initiate it with that 20 cents. If you're in the car when the earthquake hits and you're driving down the freeway, you might experience it rocking back and forth. It feels a little funny. A lot of people October 1st thought they had flat tires. But what you want to do is look at light poles and things like that to see if they're moving. If they are, pull over to the side of the road cautiously and stop. Don't stop under overpasses or on top of bridges, and wait out the earthquake. Just ride it out. It's a safe cocoon. It's got rubber tires and shock absorbers. When the earthquake stops moving, don't get out and start looking around, because the aftershocks could cause vehicles to bounce together and you could be seriously injured or crushed by another car next to you. So stay in there, listen to your radio, turn on one of the news stations, find out what's happened, get a good idea before you do anything. After sitting there a while, you'll find out whether or not you should proceed or if there's any problems with the freeways. If it's determined that this is where your car is going to sit for days or longer because the freeway overpass is down somewhere up the road and you can't get out of here, before you take off, take note of what you've got to do. You should leave a note in the car saying who you are, what your plans are, and give an address where your destination, where you're trying to get to. I would suggest not trying to go too far from here. When you get out of your vehicle, check around. You don't want to walk towards steep sloping hills because aftershocks could cause landslides, but you might want to try to get to an open area where you can stay for a while and just gradually work your way off the freeway depending on how you want to pursue that evacuation out of this particular situation. The other thing you should concern yourself with is getting supplies and keeping them on hand so that you can get them out. Preferably put them in some kind of a pack. Backpacks are great. Supplies that you can use, water, food. You want to make sure you have a pen, and you definitely want to make sure that you've got good local area maps. The area that you go to work in and also the area that you live in. This way you can write down danger areas, areas to avoid. But I would really hesitate leaving from your vehicle because it's such a great shelter. But if you need to, you've got something like this, then you just go ahead, throw this on your back, and away you go. One of the main areas where we get impressions about earthquakes is in the media, movies, television. And where I am right now is on the newest attraction at Universal Studios Tour in Universal City. And we need to learn to be able to differentiate with ourselves and our children the difference between an attraction and an actual earthquake.
If you and your children see this ride, you should all understand that the destruction depicted here has been exaggerated for its visual effect, but the length of the shaking is comparable to the real thing.
When the ground begins to shake, as you can see, it's very exciting. And this continues for about 1 minute and 45 seconds. It's something that you need to really take the time with your children and explain to them that this is entertainment and the difference between this and a real earthquake. The 8.3 great quake that we are expecting here in California is very, very survivable. If you understand and have the opportunity to experience the motions, you'll have a defense mechanism that you can use. But be very careful with the small children. You need to help them understand this, and you may have to take a little bit more time with them. We've covered a lot of information in our program, but if you'd like to get more information, we do encourage you to contact your local fire service, disaster preparedness coordinator in your community, or even the Office of Emergency Services. We also encourage you to possibly purchase or get a hold of an earthquake preparedness handbook like these. They're excellent publications for you to sit down with your family and prepare. You can also contact your local government agencies to see what brochures and handouts they have available for you. And we do encourage you to go to your local library and check out various books on earthquakes and earthquake preparedness. Some final thoughts. Don't forget to protect yourself during the earthquake and cover up if need be. Stanford Psychology Department was asked, what can a person do to deal with the psychological trauma of an earthquake? And this is what they suggested you do. When the earthquake starts, get down, brace yourself, get ready to ride out the earthquake, snap your fingers and command the earth to stop shaking. And they say do that for the duration of the earthquake. Just stop it, stop it. Now just think about that. 4 minutes later, it's going to be, oh, please, stop, stop. But when the shaking's over, acknowledge that you stopped it and say, okay. When you go to talk to your children about this, a lot of people have started using what are called earthquake buddies. Earthquake buddies are simply stuffed animals that the children use to talk out their fears after an earthquake occurs. A lot of kids have them in their school kits. And the idea for the little ones is that they can go and talk, you know, boy, Fuzzy, that was really scary, wasn't it? Don't forget, one for the boys and one for the girls. But this is very important. The other thing is for adults. It's important for adults and children to give each other a hug and say, hey, we made it, it's okay. I've told my wife this is part of preparedness, but she still doesn't believe me. I'd like to introduce you to my family. This is my wife, Elaine. This is my daughter, Kristen. This is Shadow, who played Fluffy. And that's my son, Matt, over there on the end. And this is Maui, our cat. Remember, the whole reason that we want to be involved in preparedness is our families. We want to try to get to them. That should be your first priority. But you want to do it safely. What I do is remind my family about once a week, if the earthquake should hit, what are we going to do? And the kids usually respond, okay, Dad, if we're at school, we'll stay there, we'll be cool. If you're at work, you'll be cool. And if Mom's at home, she'll be cool. They're into cool right now. But eventually, we're going to, through the out-of-state phone contact, be getting back together. I shared this information one time at a family function about earthquakes, and it took me about 3 hours. And when I got done, everybody said, hey, that's great, Henry. I haven't been invited back to a family function since. I don't think it's because they don't believe me, but every time they see me, I remind them of the earthquake and the fact that they've done nothing about it. One last thing I want to share with you is this. If you don't start doing something within the next 24 hours from the time you see this program, you're going to slip back into your old lifestyles, indifference, and when the earthquake hits, it's going to drive you crazy. You're going to know what you should have done and didn't to help you and your family. Just start the process. Sit down with your family and discuss earthquakes. The more they know, the better. Let them know what your plans are. Set up your out-of-state phone contact and start getting the water. We're going to survive this earthquake, I'm convinced, if we take the time to prepare now for it. I know a lot of you may not like the fact that I shared this with you, but aren't you glad I was honest? And if you really take this to heart, we're going to make it through this.
The KCET production, Surviving the Big One, provides information on earthquakes and how you can protect your family. To order a VHS cassette available for $26.60, which includes tax, shipping, and handling, call 1-800-343-4727 or write to KCET VideoFinders, 4401 Sunset Boulevard, Los Angeles 90027.